They were talking about assessment, and so we did your class. Your lesson was about well, one part that I want to talk about that I wrote down quickly, and like I said before, the way I look at these rubrics, whether Teach Now does it or like this or not, is that these are more holistic. I would expect to see evidence of different parts of these standards. If I looked at a whole unit, like if I looked at this writing unit, I should be able to find evidence of each part of these. But for each individual lesson, to me, if those lessons are really successful, you're not going to find every element of every standard in every lesson, because then it would just be too kind of false and put together just for the specific outcome. So, but there was one here: alignment of assessment with objectives. Now, and that I know specifically what that would kind of look like, and it didn't look exactly like that here, but I still saw evidence of it in the way you were talking about, the way you were setting up for your students about the conclusion. When you were talking, you make a connection to the conclusion you were writing based on the book that you were using, and so it made it clear to the kids, or to the students, to the young writers, it made it clear to them what your expectation for conclusion was, and you were using the conclusion in the book that you were reading to them as an example, as evidence of that, kind of like a mentor, like a mentor text. And so to me, that is, is for this kind of a lesson, was that direct connection between the alignment of assessment with objectives, because then your assessment in the end is going to be what their conclusion looks like. Yeah. And so the objective is to have, it was already stated when you were giving them the example of the lesson of that.
So do you think the objective that I put on the board did not correlate with?
Oh, no, I thought that was fine. I'm just saying, this wasn't even anything you were teaching directly. I'm just saying that I still saw evidence of this connection, because I was just watching the lesson. Like, you probably didn't even think about that might not even been your main focus of a connection to make, which probably wasn't. Mm-hmm. But when you go back and look at it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, I did make, what I was showing them is the example of what I want, connect exactly to what they're going to be tested on a bit later, right? Yeah. They're going to be assessed on. Mm-hmm. So it made that connection, and I think if you really look at the lessons closely, you'll probably see that happens in places that you intended, and other places that you didn't intend it, because the lesson itself goes kind of in that direction, and it's so well planned. The unit is structured in such a way it kind of lends itself to that. So that was good, I thought. So I thought that the biggest one here was the feedback, because that's really what you were using a lot of, because the feedback that that you were getting, the kids did a little turn and talk, and then they shared with you, and then when you were going around conferencing with the students, and so giving them feedback on what they were doing, and some of them had a precise statement, some of them were confused about. Not confused, but the way they were stating it, it was more like a question, like you will learn, even though it was going to be in the conclusion. And so you did a nice job conferencing with them about that, because that told you two things, right? That told you either, like that, we talked already, we had two kids in this video who did that. The first one, it showed you that he really still was confused. He still needs some more work about a conclusion, and maybe even about tense. Like the uses of tense.
Yeah,
tense
I wasn't sure then afterwards if it was one or the other. But,
right. Whereas the last kid that they made the same mistake, but then you question like, well, would that come in the conclusion? And they were like, oh yeah, the conclusion is at the end. They got it. So that for them it was just like an oversight. They know what the conclusion should be, and they understood that the language shouldn't be in the past tense, or should be in the past tense. There shouldn't be like you will do this. So you got some valuable information from them there. So those two, effective use of assessment. I mean, that's for me. That would show in the next lessons, right? Whether you're using the information you're getting from this to work with those kids. And so I would expect to see in the next lesson or something that you'll work with that one student who is confused. You're going to do something with them, or put them in a, maybe there was actually more than one, there's two, and maybe there's a couple of the kids that were still confused. So you'll know, okay, I'm going to pull them tomorrow and do a little
Yeah, I went through, and I don't know if you saw that I put sticky notes on ones that if they had both things, I checked mark both, and in the ones that didn't, I then talked to them individually so I could know which ones were on it, which ones were not, and then instead of doing a whole lesson, because there wasn't that many, then I just talked to them.
Exactly. So that's utilizing that assessment data in the moment to influence your next steps for those kids. And the accommodations and assessments, that would be different if this were like a traditional kind of assessment, where you're giving the kid a test and doing this, and you got to write this, and you would make those different kind of accommodations. But once again, I think just the nature of one-on-one conferencing is kind of brings in the accommodations automatically because you're working with that child where they are. So you're already, they're already showing you what they can do, and you're already working at, helping move them to the next level. But it's different than the kid sitting over here.
Yeah,
so you've already accommodated because you're doing something separate and different for both those kids. And so I think that's kind of included in there too. But assessment in a writing unit is, unless it's one of those kind of units where you're giving the students, they're writing it, they're filling in grammar or punctuation and things like that, or they're doing those editing things. This is a longer process, and the assessment is every single day when you're doing those conferences, and when you're putting the kids in small groups, or when you're, when you're doing that kind of work, when you're giving them feedback on their writing. So that happens every day, and like I said before, that I could see the way a summative assessment would work for a writing unit like a writing workshop unit that we do here. At the very last day, the kids you've been working on it for a month or whatever. The kids have 2 published pieces, they're finished, and then the next day you come in and you say you're going to have 45 minutes, do everything to write and all about. To write a small moment, let's say a small moment, or a narrative, personal narrative. Use everything that you know about personal narratives, and I'm not going to answer any questions, and go. So that's a summative assessment for that, and you can use that. That's great. Also, but you can't really. It's hard to do for a unit like this. I think for these kinds of research-oriented units, unless and of course we don't have the time for this. Unless you've had the kids research 2 topics, but only write about 1, and they already have that research. But so it's going to be different for this kind of thing. So the summative assessment for this, for me, would come from the rubric that I would create for the students that I would use with them to grade their final published piece. Okay. Even though that's not, that's not summative in the true nature. But that's the summative I think as you can get for this.
This could be used as a summative. This is the rubric. Gives information.
Yeah, it's got all this stuff. Everything that you need. I mean, what makes it. The really summative is like they're pulling all that. I would use this as summative, and this is what I've done in writing units because it's what you did. And before TC, actually, there was a long time ago TC that you didn't do today you're going to have 45 minutes. We didn't do that.
Okay.
Like their final piece was the final piece that they chose, that they'd been working on for 3 weeks, and you worked on with them, and that was considered their final piece that you graded, even though you had worked on that with them still. So it really wasn't summative in the true sense of, I'm not touching this, you're going to do what you can do, and then I'm going to look at it and we're going to see where it fits. But now NCC got that, and then they made those adjustments, and especially with Common Core, that those adjustments need to be made. But it's hard to do it with something like this because there's just no time. Nobody writes a research paper in 45 minutes. Yeah. So that would still be my summative. I would still look at it, knowing that the next time I ask the student to do this on their own, they might not have these 100% because that was still me carrying a little heavier of the load than they were. But those kinds of things, I would still think for me, it would still work as a summative assessment.
Well, I mean, they still, even when you travel, like they said, like you said, when I talk to them, I still give them instruction, or I kind of guide them, but it doesn't mean that when I leave, they're going to actually.
Yeah, oftentimes they don't. And most, and I think the student who took the feedback on conclusion and got it, I think you can be pretty much 90% sure that kid gets it and will do it. But the other student didn't, and they're probably going to, next time you ask them, even though I know you circle back around and talk to them again, they might still make that mistake again because it's kind of in that developing stage. It's not like that kind of solidified area of knowledge yet for that particular student. But that's how I look at. I mean, I think assessment on this kind of writing, these kinds of writing units, they're precise, but they're also really fluid too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also some kids, they are formative because the way they explained it. Should I stop it?
No, you can't. Don't you can go into you.
The way when I did research about formative, and it was a lot of these tests, like the Common Core tests, and that we don't really do that much. So then I was looking at these kinds of assessments, but they don't, it doesn't mean, because they're so different. Every unit is so different that you have a student that did really well in this unit because he likes concrete. And I was actually talking to parents about it. They liked looking for something in specifically, then writing about it. They got really excited. They chose the animal, especially younger boys. Whereas then the girls were doing, some girls, I mean, it seems kind of
right.
silly, but some girls were doing really well with the small moments because they got to talk about their life.
Getting them voice and stuff. Yeah.
It's interesting to see how it doesn't always correlate.
Yeah. I think the things that cross over that you can say, okay, that I know that this child is able to do this, and this every time they write. Things like, it's like the punctuation, it's like the grammar, it's like the handwriting, right? Because it's like the conventions. Because if they got the convention in a small moment, they know the conventions in research. It's the genre specific grades is what can change, right? Because some kids really do like to do some kids are really great at the when you do the kind of like the all about with their steps and things and the how to's, and they put a how to and all about, because that's how their minds work, and that other kids, like they write great personal narrative pieces, but the organizing and the putting the thoughts in this first, second, third kind of stuff is wacky for them. But if they're good at the conventions, that goes across. And if they're good at voice, that can usually part of that can go across the genres too. But some of the genre specific skill sets, I think you are going to find difference, and that's just what it's going to be. That's why people who write nonfiction don't also usually write poetry, or publish it anyway.